The people of Blackpine Ridge always said Elara Whitcombe was too much of everything they did not understand. Too quiet, too gentle, too different, and most of all, too large for the life they believed she deserved. For years, the mountain settlement had looked at Elara and decided they already knew her story. They saw the way her dresses stretched around her full figure, the way she moved carefully through crowded streets, the way she lowered her eyes when cruel laughter followed behind her. They saw a woman they thought was fragile. They never bothered to see the woman who woke before sunrise to chop kindling in the freezing air. They never saw the hands that repaired broken fences when no one else offered help. They never heard the prayers she whispered at night when loneliness felt heavier than the winter snow outside her small cabin. To them, Elara Whitcombe was simply the woman who did not belong. But the mountains had a way of keeping secrets, and hidden beneath years of insults, disappointment, and silence was a strength that would soon shake the very people who had spent their lives underestimating her. Because when a powerful man threatened to steal everything she had left, and when the truth buried beneath Blackpine Ridge finally began to rise, the woman everyone laughed at would become the one person brave enough to stand against them. And beside her would ride a stranger with a haunted past, a man who came to the mountains searching for answers, but found something he never expected, a reason to believe in someone again. The first snow of the season arrived earlier than anyone expected. It fell quietly over Blackpine Ridge, covering the old wooden buildings, the narrow dirt roads, and the endless stretch of pine trees that surrounded the settlement like silent guardians. The town looked peaceful from a distance, but peace was not always the same as kindness. Elara Whitcombe knew that better than anyone. She stood outside the small general store, holding a cloth bag filled with flour and dried beans against her chest. The cold wind brushed against her cheeks as she watched the last customers leave. She had learned long ago not to hurry. People noticed when she walked slowly. They noticed everything: the way her boots pressed deeper into the mud, the way she breathed harder after carrying heavy supplies, the way her body did not match the image of a frontier woman they believed belonged among the mountains. A young man passing by with two friends looked toward her and whispered something. The others laughed. Elara did not turn around. She had heard those voices before. She had heard them since she was a young girl. "Careful!" one of them called out. "Don't stand too close to the road. Might block the whole thing." The laughter behind her grew louder. Her fingers tightened around the cloth bag. For a moment, she wanted to turn around. She wanted to say something, anything. She wanted to ask them why being different gave them permission to be cruel, but she already knew the answer. People who enjoyed hurting others rarely needed a reason, so she lowered her head and walked home. The path to her cabin sat at the edge of town, where the buildings became fewer and the wilderness began. It was not the nicest place in Blackpine Ridge, but it was hers. The small wooden cabin had been her parents' home before they passed away. Every corner carried a memory. The old chair near the fireplace where her father used to sit, the faded curtains her mother had sewn by hand, the small kitchen table where Elara had learned to bake, sew, and survive. It was not much, but it was the only place where nobody stared at her. Nobody laughed. Nobody told her she was too much. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, placing the bag on the table. The silence welcomed her. "Another beautiful day," she whispered with a small smile. She often talked to herself, not because she was lonely. At least, that was what she told herself. She removed her coat and began putting away the supplies. Elara was the kind of person who noticed small things: a loose floorboard, a broken fence post, a neighbor who looked tired. She had spent her whole life caring about things other people ignored. Maybe that was why it hurt so much when nobody seemed to care about her. Later that evening, as snow tapped softly against the window, Elara sat near the fireplace with a worn book in her hands. She was not reading the words anymore. Her thoughts had wandered somewhere else, somewhere far away from Blackpine Ridge. She wondered what her life would have been like if people had looked at her differently, if they had seen her kindness before her appearance, if they had asked about her dreams instead of making jokes about her. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Elara looked toward the door. Nobody visited her this late. She stood carefully and walked across the room. When she opened the door, she found an elderly woman from town standing outside, covered in snow. "Elara," the woman said softly, "I hope I am not bothering you." "Mrs. Bell, come inside before you freeze." The woman stepped in quickly. Elara helped remove her coat and guided her toward the warmth of the fire. "You always do that," Mrs. Bell said. "Do what?" "Help people who have spent years giving you reasons not to." Elara looked away. "I don't know what you mean." The older woman smiled sadly. "Yes, you do." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Mrs. Bell reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Elara, I found this at the post office." Elara frowned. "For me?" Mrs. Bell nodded. "It came from someone outside town." Elara slowly took the envelope. There was no name on the front, only one word, Whitcombe. Her heart began beating faster. Nobody wrote to her, not anymore. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper. The message was short, but the words made her entire body go still. "Your father's land was never sold." Elara stared at the sentence. The fire cracked behind her. "What does this mean?" she whispered. Mrs. Bell looked uncomfortable. "I was hoping you would tell me." Elara read the message again. Her father's land, the land everyone told her had been lost years ago. The land that had supposedly been taken because of unpaid debts after his death. The land that now belonged to one of the most powerful men in Blackpine Ridge, Silas Crow, the man who owned half the businesses in town. The man people respected because they feared him. Elara felt a strange coldness move through her. "No," she whispered. Mrs. Bell watched her carefully. "Elara? My father would never have given up that land." She looked toward the window. Beyond the glass were the mountains. The same mountains that had watched everything happen. "My father loved this place." Mrs. Bell lowered her voice. "There are people who believe something was wrong with that deal." Elara turned. "Why are you telling me this now?" The older woman hesitated. "Because I saw something." "What?" "A man came through town today." Elara waited. "He was asking questions about your family." A chill ran down her spine. "Who was he?" Mrs. Bell looked toward the dark window. "I don't know." Outside, the wind grew stronger. And far beyond the edge of town, where the mountain trails disappeared into the wilderness, a lone rider moved through the snow. His name was Cole Mercer, and he had spent years running from the past. He was a man who trusted very few people, a man who had learned that promises could be broken and loyalty could be bought. But when he reached Blackpine Ridge, he was not searching for friendship. He was searching for the truth. Because years earlier, someone had stolen something from him too, and the trail had led him directly to this mountain settlement, to Silas Crow, and eventually, to Elara Whitcombe, the woman everyone believed was powerless. The woman who might be the only person capable of bringing down the secret that had been buried beneath Blackpine Ridge for decades. But first, she would have to survive the truth, and the people who would do anything to keep it hidden. The next morning, Blackpine Ridge woke beneath a blanket of fresh snow. The kind of snow that made the world look untouched, clean, almost innocent. But Elara Whitcombe knew better than anyone that appearances could lie. A beautiful layer of white could cover broken branches, hidden rocks, and dangerous paths. A peaceful-looking town could hide years of bitterness, jealousy, and secrets. She stood outside her cabin, splitting firewood with steady hands. The axe was heavy, the cold was sharp, but the work helped clear her mind. Since receiving the mysterious letter, she had barely slept. "Your father's land was never sold." The words repeated over and over. She wanted to believe them. More than anything, she wanted them to be true. But hope was dangerous. Hope could make a person forget how many times they had already been disappointed. Her father had always told her something when she was young. "People can take many things from you, Elara. Your money, your home, your comfort. But they cannot take what you carry inside unless you hand it over." Back then, she did not understand. Now she did. Because Blackpine Ridge had taken a lot from her. It had taken her confidence. It had taken her trust. It had taken the simple joy of walking into town without wondering who was laughing behind her back. But it had not taken everything. Not yet. "Elara!" The voice made her pause. She turned and saw Thomas Reed walking toward her. Thomas had grown up in Blackpine Ridge, and unlike most people in town, he had always been kind to her. Not overly kind. Not the kind that made her feel like she needed pity. Just kind. He treated her like a person, which was something she never forgot. "Morning, Thomas," she said. He removed his hat and nodded. "Need a hand with that?" Elara looked at the large pile of wood beside her. "I have been doing this for years." Thomas smiled. "I know." She raised an eyebrow. "Then why offer?" "Because just because you can do something alone doesn't mean you should always have to." The words touched something inside her. A small part of her wanted to accept, to let someone help. But old habits were hard to break. "I'm fine." Thomas studied her face. "You always say that, because I usually am." He smiled slightly. "That might be the most stubborn answer I have ever heard." Elara almost laughed. Almost. Then his expression became serious. "I heard about the letter." Her hands stopped. "Who told you?" "Mrs. Bell." Elara sighed. She should have known. The whole town would know soon enough. "Thomas, I don't want people talking. They already talk." The words were gentle, but they hurt, because they were true. They talked when you were poor. They talked when you worked harder than anyone. They talked when you helped their families. They talked because they wanted something to say. He looked toward the mountains. "But this is different." Elara followed his gaze. "What do you mean?" Thomas lowered his voice. "Because if that letter is true, Silas Crow has a problem." A cold feeling settled in her stomach. Silas Crow. Even hearing his name changed the air. He was not the kind of man people openly accused of wrongdoing. Not because he was innocent. Because nobody wanted to be the person who stood against him. He owned the largest ranch near the settlement. He controlled the supply routes. He had friends in places Elara did not even understand. And most importantly, people were afraid of him. "Thomas," she said quietly, "are you saying Silas stole my father's land?" Thomas looked uncomfortable. "I'm saying your father's death was never fully explained." Elara looked down. "My father died in an accident. That is what everyone was told." The silence between them grew heavier. "What are you saying?" Thomas hesitated. Then he stepped closer. "I'm saying your father was investigating something before he died." Elara felt her heart skip. "What?" "He believed some of the land agreements around Blackpine Ridge were being changed illegally." The axe slipped slightly in her hand. "My father knew about this." Thomas nodded. "He came to my father for advice." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Thomas looked away. "Because your father died before he could finish. And everyone just let it go." His silence answered her. Anger rose inside her. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes after years of swallowing pain. "All these years," she whispered. "All these years, people knew something was wrong." Thomas looked ashamed. Not everyone knew. But someone did. Yes. The answer was simple and painful. Elara placed the axe down. "I need to find out the truth." Thomas looked at her. "Elara, no." Her voice surprised even herself. It was not loud. It was not angry. It was certain. "I spent my whole life letting people decide what I was worth." She looked toward town. "I let them tell me I was weak because I was different." Her fingers tightened. "I let them make me feel small." Thomas watched her quietly. "But if someone stole my father's land, if someone lied about what happened to my family," she took a breath. "I won't ignore it." For the first time in years, Thomas saw something different in Elara. Not sadness. Not embarrassment. Something stronger. Determination. Later that afternoon, a stranger rode into Blackpine Ridge. The horse was dark brown and covered in snow. The rider wore a long black coat, a weathered hat, and the expression of a man who had spent too many years fighting battles nobody else knew existed. The townspeople noticed immediately. Strangers were rare, especially strangers who arrived alone. The rider stopped near the old saloon. Several men watched from the doorway. One of them whispered, "Who is that?" Another shrugged. "Trouble, probably." The stranger stepped down from his horse. He moved like someone who was always prepared. Not nervous, not afraid, just aware. His name was Cole Mercer, and the first thing he did after entering town was walk straight toward the office of Silas Crow. Inside the large wooden building overlooking Blackpine Ridge, Silas Crow sat behind his desk. He was a handsome man in his early 50s, with silver beginning to show in his dark hair. He dressed well, spoke politely, smiled often. That was what made him dangerous. Men like Silas Crow did not need to shout. They controlled people with calm voices and careful words. When Cole entered, Silas did not look surprised. "I wondered when you would arrive." Cole removed his hat. "You knew I was coming." Silas smiled. "People like you always come eventually." Cole's expression remained cold. "I'm not here for trouble." "No?" "No." Cole stepped closer. "I'm here because my father's name was destroyed in this town." Silas leaned back. "And you believe I had something to do with that?" "I know you did." The room became silent. Silas studied him. "You should be careful with accusations." Cole's jaw tightened. "You should be careful with lies." For a moment, neither man moved. Then Silas smiled. "You have your father's courage." Cole's eyes narrowed. "You knew my father." "I knew many people." "No." Cole stepped closer. "You knew him." Silas said nothing. That silence told Cole everything. Years ago, his father had been accused of stealing land records and cheating settlers. The accusations destroyed his reputation. His family lost everything. And shortly after, his father died. Cole had spent years searching for proof that his father was framed. Every trail led back to one place, Blackpine Ridge, and one man, Silas Crow. "You should leave town," Silas finally said. Cole looked at him. "Is that a threat?" "No," Silas smiled. "A warning." Cole turned toward the door, but before he left, Silas spoke again. "There is another person asking questions." Cole stopped. "Who?" Silas looked out the window. Across the snowy street stood Elara Whitcombe, holding a folder against her chest, watching. She believes she is searching for justice. Silas smiled faintly. She has no idea what she is stepping into. Cole followed his gaze. For the first time, he saw Elara. He noticed the way people moved around her, the whispers, the judgment, the way she stood alone while carrying something heavier than the papers in her hands. Something about her caught his attention, not because she looked helpless, because she did not. There was sadness in her eyes, but there was also something else, strength, a strength that looked like it had been waiting years for someone to finally notice. Cole had spent his life searching for the truth. He never expected that the first person who might help him find it would be the woman everyone else refused to see. And Elara Whitcombe had no idea that by opening her father's old records, she had just placed herself directly in the path of the most dangerous secret Blackpine Ridge had ever hidden. The next morning, Elara Whitcombe woke before the sun reached the mountains. She had always been an early riser. When she was a child, her father used to tell her that the mountains belonged to those who respected their mornings. "The world tells its secrets before everyone else wakes up," he would say. Back then, Elara thought he was simply talking about the quiet beauty of sunrise. Now she wondered if he had meant something else. Secrets. That was what Blackpine Ridge seemed to be filled with. Secrets buried under years of silence. Secrets hidden behind polite smiles. Secrets that powerful people hoped would disappear with time. Elara sat at her kitchen table, staring at the old wooden box in front of her. She had found it the night before, while searching through her father's belongings. It had been hidden beneath a loose floorboard near the fireplace. She had lived in that cabin her entire life, and somehow she had never known it was there. Inside were papers, old documents, letters, notes written in her father's handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the first page. Her father's name was written across the top. Jonathan Whitcombe. She traced the letters with her finger. She could almost hear his voice. She could almost see him sitting at this same table, writing late into the night while her mother told him he needed to sleep. He had always been curious, always asking questions. That was what she loved about him, and maybe what got him into trouble. Elara unfolded the paper. The first sentence made her stop. Silas Crowe is changing the land records. Her breath caught. She read further. Her father had been investigating several land transfers around Blackpine Ridge. Families who had owned their farms for generations suddenly found themselves without legal rights. Documents disappeared. Signatures changed. People who questioned it suddenly found themselves threatened or forced to leave. Elara placed the paper down. The room felt smaller. For years, she had believed her father lost everything because of bad luck, because of debt, because life had simply been unfair. But now she wondered if someone had taken it from him. Someone had destroyed her family, and everyone had watched. A knock came at the door. Elara quickly covered the papers. "Who is it?" "It's me, Thomas." She sighed and stood. When she opened the door, Thomas immediately noticed something was different. "What happened?" Elara looked at him. "I found proof." His expression changed. "Proof?" She stepped aside. "Come in." Thomas entered and removed his hat. When he saw the papers on the table, his face became serious. "Elara, I know." She sat down. "My father knew." Thomas picked up one of the documents carefully. He was investigating Crowe. "Yes." The room became quiet. Then Thomas looked at her. "You need to be careful." Elara looked confused. "Why?" "Because knowing something and proving something are two different things." She frowned. "What does that mean?" Thomas placed the paper down. "It means Silas Crowe has spent years making sure nobody can challenge him." Elara looked toward the window. Outside, Blackpine Ridge continued moving like any normal day. People walked the streets. Stores opened. Children played in the snow. A person could look at the town and think nothing was wrong. But underneath it all was something rotten. "I'm not afraid of him," Elara said. Thomas looked at her sadly. "I know." She looked surprised. "Then why do you look worried?" "Because sometimes the bravest people are the ones who get hurt first." The words stayed with her. Before Elara could answer, another sound came from outside. A horse. Both of them turned. A rider had stopped near her cabin. Elara recognized him immediately. The stranger from town, Cole Mercer. Thomas stepped closer to the window. "Who is that?" "I don't know." But Elara already felt something. Not fear. Something else. Curiosity. Cole climbed down from his horse and approached the cabin. He knocked once. Not aggressively, but not politely either. Just confidently. Elara opened the door. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before. The tiredness around his eyes. The small scar near his jaw. The way he looked at people, like he was searching for the truth behind their words. "You're Elara Whitcombe," he said. She frowned. "That depends on who is asking." A small flicker of surprise crossed his face. Perhaps he expected someone quieter, someone easier to intimidate. "I'm Cole Mercer." "I know." His eyebrows lifted. "You know?" Everyone knows when a stranger arrives in Blackpine Ridge. A faint smile almost appeared on his face. "Almost. I suppose that's true." Elara waited. "What do you want?" Cole looked past her shoulder, at the papers on the table. His expression changed. "You found them." Elara immediately stepped in front of the doorway. "How do you know about those?" Cole looked at her carefully. "Because I've been looking for the same answers." The words made her pause. "What answers?" He took a breath. "The truth about what happened to our families." Elara stared at him. "Our families? My father." She remained silent. Cole continued. "Your father wasn't the only man Silas Crowe destroyed." A strange feeling moved through her. She did not know this man. She had known him for less than a minute. But somehow, his words felt heavier than anything she had heard in years. "What happened to your father?" Cole looked toward the mountains. "He was accused of stealing land records." Elara's eyes widened. "That's what my father was investigating." Cole nodded. I know. How? Because before he died, your father sent my father a letter. Elara felt frozen. My father knew yours. Yes. Why didn't I know? Cole looked down. Because the letter never reached him. The silence that followed felt endless. Someone had hidden it. Someone had made sure their fathers never worked together. Someone had benefited from keeping them apart. Silas Crow, Elara whispered. Cole looked at her. You understand quickly. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because after years of feeling ignored, suddenly everything was becoming clear. The missing records, the lies, the fear. My whole life, she said quietly. I thought people looked down on me because of how I looked. Cole said nothing. She looked away. But maybe they also wanted me to feel powerless. The words surprised her, because they were true. For years, she had believed the insults were only about her appearance. Maybe they were also a way to keep her silent. A woman who believed she was worthless was less likely to fight. Cole watched her. You're not what they say you are. Elara looked at him. What does that mean? It means everyone in this town has spent years telling you who they think you are. His voice softened. But they never asked. The simple statement touched something deep inside her. Because nobody had. Not really. They had looked at her, but they had never seen her. A loud voice interrupted them. Well, well. The three of them turned. A man stood near the edge of the property. He wore a dark coat and expensive boots. Silas Crow's right-hand man. Gavin Hale. Everyone knew him. He was the kind of man who smiled while delivering bad news. Elara Whitcombe, Gavin said. She stepped outside. What do you want? Gavin looked amused. I heard you found some old papers. Thomas moved closer. What business is that of yours? Gavin ignored him. Elara, sometimes old things are better left buried. Her eyes hardened. Is that advice? Perhaps? Or a warning? Gavin smiled. You're a smart woman. The compliment sounded like an insult. I think you should understand something. He glanced at Cole. People who dig into the past often find things they wish they never discovered. Elara stood silently. The old version of herself would have looked down, would have apologized, would have tried to avoid conflict. But that woman was slowly disappearing. My father spent his life protecting what was his, she said. Gavin's smile faded slightly. And I think I finally understand why. The wind moved through the trees. For the first time, Gavin looked uncertain. Only for a second. Then it was gone. Be careful, Miss Whitcombe. He turned away. But before leaving, he looked back. Mountains can be dangerous. Elara watched him ride away. Cole stood beside her. You realize that was meant to scare you? Yes. And? She looked at the papers in her hand. Then at the mountains. Then back at the road where Gavin disappeared. I spent years being afraid of people laughing at me. Her voice was quiet. But I'm not afraid of the truth. Cole looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something he thought he had lost. Hope. Because the woman standing beside him was not someone waiting to be rescued. She was someone who had finally realized she had been fighting all along. And now, together, they were going to uncover everything Blackpine Ridge had tried to hide, no matter who stood in their way. The sun was beginning to disappear behind the western peaks when Elara finally closed the cabin door. For several minutes, she simply stood there, silent, still. Her hand remained on the wooden handle, as if she expected someone to knock again, as if Gavin Hale might return, as if Silas Crow himself might appear outside and tell her that everything she had learned was a mistake. But the truth had already entered her home, and once the truth arrived, it was impossible to pretend it was not there. Cole Mercer stood near the fireplace, looking over the old documents spread across the table. He handled them carefully, not like a man searching for information, like a man touching pieces of history that had been stolen from him. Elara noticed. You really believed your father was innocent all these years? Cole did not answer immediately. He stared at one of the papers. My father was many things. His voice was quiet, stubborn, hard-headed, sometimes too proud to admit when he needed help. Elara listened, but he was not a thief. The certainty in his voice surprised her. Not anger, not desperation, just absolute belief. My father taught me something, Cole continued. He said a person's name is the one thing nobody can truly replace. He looked down. When Silas Crow destroyed his reputation, he didn't just take land. He took the one thing my father had spent his entire life building. Elara sat across from him. I understand. Cole looked at her. She gave a small, sad smile. I know what it feels like when people decide who you are without knowing you. For a moment, their eyes met, and neither of them looked away. Because they both understood something the rest of Blackpine Ridge did not. Being judged unfairly leaves a wound that nobody else can see. A person can survive hunger, a person can survive cold, but being told again and again that you are less than others, that changes the way you see yourself. Elara, Cole said softly. She looked at him. You should know something. What? Silas Crow is not going to simply let this go. She looked back at the papers. I know. No, you don't. There was no harshness in his voice, only concern. He has spent years protecting whatever he did. He has money, influence, people who will do whatever he asks. Elara folded her hands. And what do you have? The question caught him off guard. What? You have been chasing him for years. Cole looked away. I have evidence. That wasn't my question. The room became quiet. Elara studied him. What do you have besides anger? For the first time, Cole seemed unsure. The question reached somewhere deeper than he expected. I don't know. Elara nodded slowly. I think maybe that is why we found each other. Cole looked at her. We found each other. She looked slightly embarrassed by her own words. I mean, we both spent years trying to prove something to people who refused to listen. A faint smile touched his face. You always talk like that. Like what? Like you're saying something simple, but somehow making it impossible to ignore. Elara looked down. Nobody had ever said something like that to her. Not because people hated her, because most people never took the time to notice her. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not awkward, not forced. Just two people who had spent years feeling alone, finally sitting beside someone who understood. The moment ended when a strong gust of wind hit the cabin. The window shutters shook. Cole immediately stood. What is it? Elara looked confused. What? You heard that? She listened. At first, nothing. Then she heard it. A horse. Outside. Someone was approaching. Cole reached toward the gun at his side. Elara noticed. Do you think it's him? I don't know. They waited. The footsteps stopped outside. A shadow crossed the window. Then came a knock. 3 slow knocks. Cole moved toward the door. Elara grabbed his arm. Wait, he looked at her. You don't know who that is. Neither did he. And somehow, that made the moment more dangerous. Cole opened the door slightly. A man stood outside. Older, weathered. His face carried the marks of a hard life, but his eyes were kind. Jonathan Whitcombe's daughter. Elara stepped forward. Yes. The man removed his hat. My name is Walter Briggs. Cole watched carefully. And you are? Walter looked at him. Someone who should have come here years ago. The words made Elara freeze. What does that mean? Walter looked past them into the cabin. Then he stepped inside. I knew your father. Elara's heart tightened. Everyone keeps saying that. She looked frustrated now. Everyone knew my father. Everyone knew something was wrong. But nobody told me anything. Walter lowered his head. You're right. The honesty surprised her. I should have. Why didn't you? The older man took a long breath. Because I was afraid. The answer was not what she expected. Afraid of what? Silas Crow. The name filled the room. Walter sat down slowly. Your father discovered something bigger than stolen land records. Cole moved closer. What? Walter looked at him. Your fathers were not investigating separate crimes. Elara felt a chill. They were investigating the same thing. The fire cracked. What thing? Cole asked. Walter looked toward the window. Years ago, before either of you knew what was happening, Silas Crow began buying land from struggling families. That doesn't sound illegal, Elara said. No, Walter nodded. But he was not buying it. The room went silent. He was forcing people out. Cole's expression hardened. How? Threats, fake debts, changed documents. Walter looked at Elara. Your father found proof. And your father? Cole asked. Helped him. The realization settled heavily. They had been connected from the beginning. Two families destroyed by the same man. What happened? Elara whispered. Walter looked down. Your father planned to expose him. A painful silence followed. Then why didn't he? Walter's face changed. Because he carried guilt, deep guilt. Because someone betrayed him. Elara felt her chest tighten. Who? Walter looked at her. I don't know. The answer disappointed her. But then he continued. But I know someone close to him was involved. The cabin suddenly felt colder. Someone close. Someone trusted. Someone who knew their plans. Cole looked toward the documents. Do you have proof? Walter nodded. I have something better. He reached into his coat and removed a small leather journal. Elara recognized the handwriting immediately. Her father's. Her breath caught. Where did you get that? Walter handed it to her. Your father gave it to me the night before he died. Her hands shook as she took it. Why? Because he knew something might happen. She opened the journal. The first pages were filled with notes about land ownership, names, dates, records. Then she reached the final page. Only one sentence was written there, but it made her blood run cold. The person who betrayed me is someone I loved. Elara stared at the words. Someone I loved. Not someone I knew. Not someone I worked with. Someone I loved. Cole watched her face. What does it say? She could barely speak. My father knew. Knew what? She looked up. He knew who betrayed him. The room fell silent. Walter stood. There is more. Elara turned. What? Your father hid the final evidence somewhere. Where? Walter shook his head. He never told me. Cole looked at the journal. But he left clues. Walter nodded. Yes. Elara looked down at the pages. For years, she believed her father's story ended with his death. Now she realized something terrifying. His story had continued. Waiting. For her. Outside, the wind moved through the mountains. The same mountains that had kept secrets for years. But secrets did not stay buried forever. And somewhere in Blackpine Ridge, Silas Crow was beginning to realize something. Elara Whitcombe was no longer the quiet woman people ignored. She was asking questions. She was finding answers. And worse, she was no longer alone. Because the stranger who arrived searching for revenge had found something stronger. A reason to fight. And together, Elara and Cole were getting closer to the truth that could destroy everything Silas Crow had built. But before they could uncover the final secret her father left behind, they would have to discover the most painful truth of all. The betrayal did not come from an enemy. It came from someone standing close enough to call themselves family. The journal felt heavier than it should have. Elara Whitcombe sat at the kitchen table long after Walter Briggs had left, her fingers resting on the worn leather cover. It was strange how something so small could carry so much weight. A lifetime of memories, a lifetime of unanswered questions. Her father's handwriting stared back at her from every page, and for the first time in years, she felt close to him again. Not like a memory, like a conversation that had been interrupted. The fire slowly burned lower, but Elara barely noticed. Cole Mercer stood near the window, watching the darkness outside. He had not said much since Walter left. Elara noticed that about him. Cole was a man who carried his thoughts quietly. A person could spend hours around him and still wonder what was happening behind his eyes. Finally, she closed the journal. He knew. Cole turned. What? My father knew something was going to happen. Her voice shook slightly. He knew he was in danger. Cole walked back toward the table. Did he write anything else? Elara opened the journal again. There are pages missing. Cole leaned closer. How many? I don't know. She carefully looked through the binding. Someone removed them. The realization settled between them. Someone had not just hidden the truth, someone had tried to erase it. Cole's expression darkened. Silas. Elara looked at him. Maybe. You don't believe that. She shook her head. I believe he is involved. But my father wrote that someone he loved betrayed him. She touched the page gently. That means it could have been anyone. Cole became quiet, because he knew she was right. The most dangerous betrayals were never committed by strangers. They came from people who knew where you kept your heart. The next morning, Elara and Cole began searching the cabin. Not randomly, carefully. Her father had always been organized. Every tool had a place. Every book had a purpose. If he had hidden something, he would have left a clue. They searched through old shelves, behind paintings, under floorboards, inside drawers that had not been opened in years. For hours, they found nothing. Then Cole noticed something. Elara. She looked up. What? He stood near the fireplace. Your father repaired this himself. She walked over. Yes. Do you know when? She thought for a moment. The year before he died. Cole ran his fingers along the wooden frame. Why would someone repair a fireplace? Because it was broken? He shook his head. No, he pointed. Because he wanted access to something. Elara looked closer. At first, she saw nothing. Then she noticed it. A small scratch near the stone. Almost invisible. A mark. Like someone had carved a symbol. She touched it. My father made this. Cole nodded. Probably. They carefully moved the stones. Behind them was a narrow opening. Inside was a small metal box. Elara's heart began racing. She reached inside. The box was cold, heavy, and old. She brought it to the table. For a moment, neither of them moved. It felt like opening it would change everything. Finally, Elara lifted the lid. Inside was a folded map, a small key, and a letter. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. My dearest Elara, she read. The words immediately broke something inside her. Because it was not a business letter, not a record. It was for her. If you are reading this, then something has happened that I hoped you would never have to face. She stopped. Her eyes filled. Cole looked away, giving her privacy. She continued. I spent my life trying to protect you from the ugliness of this world. But I fear I may have protected you too much. Elara swallowed. Your heart has always been your greatest strength. Never allow anyone to convince you that kindness means weakness. Her vision blurred. She wiped her eyes. I know there are people who have judged you without knowing you. I know there are those who have made you feel as though you are less than others. Her hand tightened around the paper. But my daughter, listen to me carefully. You are not defined by the opinions of people who never took the time to see you. A tear slipped down her cheek. Cole looked at her. He had seen many things in his life. Violence, loss, betrayal. But seeing Elara hold a letter from her father somehow felt more painful. Because she was not crying because she was weak. She was crying because she had finally received words she had needed for years. Her father had seen her, even when the world did not. She continued reading. There is a reason I hid the evidence instead of exposing Silas immediately. She paused. Because the person who helped him is someone close to us. Elara looked up. Cole stepped closer. What else? She looked at the letter. My father says the person who betrayed him had access to every document, every conversation, every plan. Cole's expression changed. Someone inside your family circle. Elara nodded. She read the next line. I never wanted to believe it. I searched for another answer, but the evidence kept leading me back to the same person. Her heart pounded. The person who betrayed me was... The sentence ended there. Nothing else. Elara stared. The page had been torn. Again. Someone had removed the most important part. Cole slowly exhaled. They knew. Elara looked at him. Who? Whoever took those pages. The room became silent. Someone had been inside her cabin. Someone had searched her father's hiding places. Someone had removed the truth before she could find it. And that meant one thing. They were watching. A sudden sound came from outside. A branch breaking. Cole immediately reached for his gun. Elara stood. Someone is out there. They moved carefully toward the window. The snow outside reflected the moonlight. At first, nothing moved. Then they saw it. Footprints. Leading away from the cabin. Cole grabbed his coat. I'm going after them. Elara caught his arm. No. He looked at her. If someone was here, they might know where the missing pages are. I know. Then why stop me? Because she was scared. She could admit that, but she also knew something else. Chasing someone into the darkness without knowing who they were was exactly what Silas Crow wanted. Because that is what they expect. Cole studied her. What do you mean? They want us angry. They want us rushing. She looked toward the footprints. They want us to make mistakes. For a moment, Cole said nothing. Then a small smile appeared. You surprise me. Elara looked confused. Is that good or bad? Good. He put his coat back down. You think differently. She looked away. Most people don't say that. Most people are wrong. The words were simple, but they stayed with her. Later that night, they studied the map found in the box. It showed a section of land outside Blackpine Ridge, a place marked with a small circle. What is this? Elara asked. Cole leaned closer. I don't know. At the bottom of the map was a name. Whitcombe Valley. Elara froze. That was my family land. Cole nodded. But look here. He pointed. There was another marking. A second name. Mercer Ridge. His expression changed. Our families owned neighboring land. Elara looked at him. So the land dispute wasn't separate. No. Cole looked at the map. It was always connected. The mystery was becoming clearer, and somehow more dangerous. Because if Silas Crow had stolen their family's land, he had not done it randomly. He had planned it. Carefully. Patiently. For years. The next morning, they would travel to the old Whitcombe Valley. They would search for whatever evidence her father had hidden there, but neither of them knew that someone else had already started moving. Someone who had been waiting years for this moment. Someone who knew Elara's family better than anyone, and someone who was terrified that the truth was finally coming home. Because the greatest secret of Blackpine Ridge was not buried in the mountains. It was buried among the people who lived there. And soon, Elara Whitcombe would discover that the person she trusted most was connected to the betrayal that destroyed her family. The journey to Whitcombe Valley began before sunrise. The mountains were still covered in darkness when Elara stepped outside her cabin, carrying a small pack over her shoulder. The air was painfully cold, the kind of cold that made every breath feel sharp. But for the first time in many years, Elara did not feel like she was simply trying to survive another day. She felt like she was walking toward something, toward answers, toward the truth her father had spent his final days trying to protect. Cole Mercer stood beside his horse, tightening the saddle straps. He looked toward her as she approached. You're sure about this? Elara adjusted her coat. Yes. You know there is a chance we find nothing. I know. There is also a chance we find something someone does not want us to find. She looked at him. I know that too. Cole studied her face. The woman standing in front of him was not the same person he had seen when he first arrived in Blackpine Ridge. Back then, he saw someone who had been hurt by years of cruelty. Someone who had learned to hide her pain behind silence. Now he saw something else. A woman who was still wounded, but no longer willing to stay quiet. You really are not afraid, he said. Elara gave a small smile. That's not true. Cole raised an eyebrow. You are? Yes. She looked toward the mountains. I am afraid. The honesty surprised him. Then why keep going? Elara looked back at him. Because being afraid does not mean I should stop. The answer stayed with him. Because Cole understood that better than anyone. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was deciding something mattered more. They rode for several hours through narrow mountain paths. The farther they traveled from Blackpine Ridge, the quieter the world became. No town noises, no whispers, no judgment, only the sound of horses moving through snow. For Elara, the silence felt strange. She had spent years believing everyone was watching her. But here, among the mountains, nobody cared about the things people in town obsessed over. Nobody cared about her size. Nobody cared about the way she looked. The mountains only cared whether a person could endure. And Elara realized something. She had been enduring her entire life. After a long ride, they reached the edge of Whitcombe Valley. Elara stopped. Her heart tightened. She had not been here since she was a child. The land looked different, older. The trees had grown taller. The fields where her father once worked were covered in snow. But she still remembered, running through the grass, her mother calling her back for dinner, her father lifting her onto his shoulders when she was young. For a moment, she was not a woman searching for answers. She was just a daughter remembering home. Cole noticed the change in her expression. "You okay?" Elara nodded slowly. "I forgot how much I missed this place." Cole looked around. It was beautiful. It was. She paused. Then everything changed. They continued deeper into the valley. According to the map, her father had marked an old storage building near the northern edge of the property. They found it just before sunset. It was barely standing. The roof had partially collapsed. The wooden walls were covered in frost. Cole dismounted. "This place has been abandoned for years." Elara stepped closer. "My father would not have marked it unless it mattered." They entered carefully. Dust filled the air. Old tools hung from the walls. Broken furniture sat covered beneath faded cloth. For several minutes, they searched. Nothing. No documents. No hidden boxes. No clues. Elara's hope began to fade. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe her father's final secret had disappeared forever. Then Cole stopped. "Elara." Something in his voice made her turn. He was standing beside an old wooden beam. "What?" He pointed. There was a carving, a small symbol, the same symbol they found near the fireplace. Her eyes widened. "My father." They moved the beam aside. Behind it was a narrow space. Inside was another container, but this one was not like the first. It was larger, older, and locked. Cole looked at the small key they found in the cabin. Elara held her breath. She placed the key into the lock. It turned. Inside were several folded papers, a small collection of photographs, and a letter. But this time, the letter was not addressed to her. It was addressed to someone else. Elara looked at the name. Her face changed. Cole noticed. "What is it?" She slowly handed him the paper. He read the name, and his expression hardened. "Thomas Reed." The room became silent. Thomas, the man who had helped her. The man who had stood beside her. The man she trusted. Elara immediately shook her head. "No." Cole looked at her. "Elara, no." Her voice became firmer. "Thomas would never." "You don't know that." She looked hurt. "I do." Cole softened his voice. "I know you want to believe that." She looked away. Because that was the painful part. She did want to believe it. Thomas had been one of the only people in Blackpine Ridge who treated her with kindness. When everyone else laughed, he had spoken to her. When everyone else ignored her, he had listened. The idea that he could be connected to her father's betrayal felt impossible. Cole carefully opened the letter. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was not her father's. Someone else had written it. "Jonathan, I know what you discovered. I know what you plan to do. If you continue, people will suffer." Elara's stomach tightened. Cole continued reading. "The arrangement must remain hidden. Crow has already made his decision. You must understand that some sacrifices are necessary." Cole looked up. "Arrangement." Elara shook her head. "No." She took the letter. "This is not enough." "You're right." Cole nodded. "We need more." Elara looked through the photographs. Then she froze. There was a picture of several men standing outside a building in Blackpine Ridge. Silas Crow, Gavin Hale, and Thomas Reed's father. Her hands trembled. Thomas's father. Cole looked closer. "What about him? My father trusted him." She looked at the photograph. They were friends. Cole was quiet. Then he noticed something. On the back of the photograph was a date. The date was the same month Jonathan Whitcombe died. A cold feeling moved through the room. Someone had not just betrayed her father, they had been planning it. For a long time. Suddenly, a sound came from outside. A horse. Both of them turned. Cole immediately moved toward the door. "Stay behind me." Elara grabbed the old rifle hanging on the wall. "I'm not helpless." He looked at her. "I know." The words were simple, but they meant everything. They stepped outside. The valley was silent. Too silent. Then a voice came from the trees. "You should have left things buried." Elara froze. A man stepped into view. Gavin Hale. He looked different without his usual calm smile. More dangerous. "You followed us." Cole's hand moved near his weapon. Gavin noticed. "Careful." He looked at Elara. "I came here because I wanted to give you a chance." "A chance for what?" "To walk away." Elara stared at him. "You threatened me yesterday. I warned you. You are afraid." For the first time, Gavin's expression changed, just slightly. Elara saw it, and so did Cole. She continued, "You're not here because you think I'm dangerous." She stepped forward. "You're here because you know I'm getting close." The mountain wind moved between them. Gavin stared at her, and something about the way he looked at her told Elara something important. He had underestimated her, just like everyone else. "You really are Jonathan's daughter," Gavin said quietly. Elara's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Gavin looked toward the old building. "It means you have the same problem he had." "What problem?" Gavin turned back. "You believe the truth matters more than survival." Before they could respond, Gavin stepped back toward his horse. "This is your last warning." Cole raised his voice. "And if we don't listen," Gavin looked at him, "then you will learn what Jonathan learned." A pause. "That sometimes the truth costs more than a person is willing to pay." He mounted his horse and disappeared into the snow. Elara watched him leave. Her hands were shaking. Not because she was afraid of Gavin. Because she understood something now. The people behind the betrayal were not hiding anymore. They knew she was searching. They knew she was close. And they were starting to panic. That night, inside the abandoned building, Elara sat beside the fire they built. She looked at the photograph again. At Thomas's father, at Silas Crow, at the faces of people who had once been part of her family's life. "I don't want to believe Thomas was involved." Cole sat across from her. "Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that hurt the most." She looked at him. "Have you ever had someone you trusted betray you?" Cole stared into the fire. Yes. The answer was immediate. Elara waited, but he did not explain, not yet, because Cole Mercer carried a secret of his own, a secret connected to why he had really come to Blackpine Ridge. And soon Elara would discover that he was not only searching for justice, he was searching for the person responsible for destroying his own family, and that person's name was closer to her story than either of them realized. The fire burned low inside the abandoned Whitcombe storage house. Outside, the wind moved through the valley, carrying the cold sound of the mountains. Elara sat quietly, staring at the photograph in her hands. Thomas Reed. For years, she had believed he was one of the few people in Blackpine Ridge who truly saw her. Now she was forced to question everything, and that hurt more than she expected, because anger was easier than disappointment. Anger gave a person something to hold on to, but disappointment left an emptiness behind. Cole watched her carefully. "You should sleep." Elara gave a small, humorless laugh. "Sleep?" She looked down at the photograph. "My father was betrayed. My family's land was stolen. Someone I trusted might have been involved." Her voice became softer. "And you think I can sleep?" Cole understood. He had lived with that same feeling for years. The feeling of having questions that refused to disappear. The feeling of waking up every morning knowing something was wrong, but not knowing how to fix it. "You remind me of someone." Elara looked at him. "Who?" "My father." She smiled faintly. Was that a compliment? It was. "Your father sounds stubborn." He was. "So am I." Cole almost smiled. Yes. The small moment of humor disappeared quickly, because they both knew they were standing at the edge of something dangerous. The next morning, they returned to Blackpine Ridge. But this time, they did not return as people searching for answers. They returned as people who had found enough answers to become a threat. The town felt different when they entered. People watched. Whispers followed. But Elara no longer lowered her eyes. She noticed something strange. The same people who had spent years judging her now looked uncertain, almost afraid, not of her, of what she knew. When they reached the center of town, Thomas Reed was waiting. The moment he saw the expression on Elara's face, he knew. Something had changed. "Elara?" She stopped. For several seconds, she simply looked at him. The old Elara would have immediately explained. She would have apologized for looking upset. She would have worried about hurting his feelings. But that woman was gone. "Thomas," her voice was calm. "Why didn't you tell me about your father?" His face changed. Only slightly, but enough. Cole noticed. "What are you talking about?" Thomas asked. Elara held up the photograph. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get that?" That was all she needed to hear. Not denial, not confusion, fear. "You knew," she whispered. Thomas looked around. "Not here." "No." Elara shook her head. "I spent my whole life being quiet, because people told me my voice did not matter." Her eyes hardened. "I'm done being quiet." Several people nearby stopped to watch. Thomas looked ashamed. "Elara, please, tell me the truth." The silence between them stretched. Finally, Thomas spoke. "My father worked with Silas Crow." Elara felt her heart sink. "But I didn't know everything." Cole stepped forward. "You expect us to believe that?" Thomas looked at him. "Yes." There was pain in his voice. "My father died carrying that guilt." Elara froze. "What?" Thomas looked at her. He knew what Silas was doing. The words came slowly. He knew families were being forced off their land. He knew documents were changed. Then why didn't he stop him? Thomas looked down. Because he was afraid. Elara felt anger rising. Afraid? She looked around at the town. Everyone was afraid. Her voice shook. But people still lost their homes. Thomas nodded. "You're right." The simple acceptance surprised her. "I was young when it happened. I didn't understand. But before my father died, he told me something." "What?" Thomas swallowed. "He said your father was the bravest man he ever knew." Elara looked away. "He said he tried to fix what he had helped break." Cole frowned. "Then why hide it?" Thomas looked at him. "Because Silas knew." The town seemed to grow colder. "Silas knew my father wanted to confess. He threatened him." Elara looked at Thomas. "And you?" Thomas looked ashamed. "I was scared too. The honesty hurt, but it also sounded real. I should have told you years ago." Elara said nothing, because she wanted to be angry. She wanted to blame him, but she could see something in his eyes. Regret. Real regret. Before anyone could speak, a loud voice interrupted. "Well." Everyone turned. Silas Crow stood near the road, dressed perfectly, calm as always. But something was different. He looked worried. "Quite a gathering." Cole stepped forward. "You knew." Silas smiled. "Careful. No more warnings." Cole's voice was cold. "No more games." Silas looked at Elara. "You have your father's courage." Elara stared back. "And you have his weakness." For the first time, Silas looked offended. "What did you say?" "You thought you could break people because you convinced them they were powerless." She stepped forward. "But you were wrong." The crowd became silent. Silas looked around. The people of Blackpine Ridge were listening. That was what frightened him. Not Elara, not Cole. The possibility that others might finally stop being afraid. "You think the truth will save you?" Silas asked. Elara looked at him. "No." She glanced toward the mountains. "I think the truth will save everyone else." Silas's expression hardened. "Leave this matter alone." "No." The answer came immediately. "I spent years wondering why people treated me like I was less than them." Her voice became stronger. "Now I understand." She looked directly at him. "You wanted people like me to feel invisible." Silas said nothing. "But invisible people are dangerous." A murmur moved through the crowd. "Because when nobody expects you to fight." She held up the documents. "They never notice when you start winning." Silas turned away, but Cole stopped him. "This ends now." Silas looked back. You think you have enough? Cole smiled slightly. No. He looked at Elara. But we have enough people. And that was the thing Silas Crow had never understood. Power did not always come from money. Sometimes it came from people finally refusing to stay silent. The following days changed Blackpine Ridge forever. The evidence was collected. The hidden records were examined. Old documents were compared. And slowly, the truth came out. Silas Crow had spent years manipulating land agreements. He had taken advantage of struggling families. He had destroyed reputations. He had built his fortune by convincing people they were too powerless to fight back. But now those people had voices, and those voices could no longer be ignored. Silas was eventually forced to answer for what he had done, not through revenge, not through violence, through the very thing he feared most, the truth. Months later, spring finally arrived in Blackpine Ridge. The snow melted from the mountains, the rivers ran clear, and the town began rebuilding. Elara stood outside the Whitcombe property, looking over the land her family had once lost. The fields were still damaged. The old building still needed repairs, but it was home. Cole walked toward her. You know, when I first came here, I expected to find revenge. Elara smiled. And did you? He looked at her. No. What did you find? He thought for a moment. Something better. She looked away, embarrassed. You're getting sentimental. Maybe. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. She laughed softly. A real laugh. The kind she had forgotten she could make. For years, Elara believed the world saw only one thing when they looked at her. Her size, her differences, the things they thought made her less. But she finally understood something. The opinions of others only had power when she allowed them to define her. She was not the woman people mocked. She was not the woman people ignored. She was not the woman they decided was weak. She was Elara Whitcombe, a woman who survived loneliness, a woman who uncovered the truth, a woman who stood when others expected her to fall. Cole stood beside her, looking over the valley. You know something? What? I think this mountain liked you from the beginning. Elara smiled. That's a strange thing to say. Mountains understand strength. She looked at him. And you think I'm strong? Cole turned toward her. I think you are the strongest person I have ever met. The words were quiet, but they meant more than any grand speech, because coming from him, they were not pity, not kindness, respect. And that was what Elara had wanted all along. Not for people to ignore what made her different. Not for people to pretend the world had never hurt her. Only for someone to see all of her, the kindness, the scars, the courage, the woman beneath everything everyone else had judged. Years later, people in Blackpine Ridge would tell stories about the woman who exposed Silas Crow. They would talk about the mystery of the stolen land. They would talk about the stranger who came from the mountains. They would talk about the secrets that nearly destroyed a town. But the part people remembered most was something simpler. They remembered Elara Whitcombe, the woman they underestimated, the woman they laughed at, the woman they thought would never stand against them. And they remembered that the quietest voice in the room could sometimes become the strongest, because sometimes the person everyone tries to overlook is the person who changes everything.